Hi, and welcome to this review for Inscryption on Nintendo Switch. The reason we are here today is once again due to the kind donation of Ben over on the eShopper Reviews Patreon, who is sponsoring this review. Thank you again, Ben. Before talking about this review, a note about spoilers. There is content farther into the game that I will only be touching on lightly in this review to avoid giving major spoilers. However, I will be discussing in greater detail some of the things that happen in roughly the first third of the game, and it is that portion of the game that the recorded video of the game I will be using is derived from. However, if you're wanting to go in fresh without any spoilers whatsoever, I will simply say that I found this game to be an excellent pairing of card game and roguelike elements with first-person graphic adventure elements, all wrapped in a presentation that is absolutely oozing with foreboding atmosphere. If you like games like Slay the Spire, but want something with more of a story focus and even some horror elements, you don't need to listen to any more of this review, just go ahead and buy the game. Now, for those wanting a more comprehensive review, please feel free to stick around. Okay. As I mentioned a moment ago, the core gameplay of Inscryption combines card game, roguelike, and first-person graphic adventure elements. At first, this just appears to be a card game with roguelike elements, similar to games like Slay the Spire. However, there's more going on here than there initially seems to be. Your main interaction with the game will be through playing its central card game, which has a layout that's roughly similar to games like Hearthstone or Eternal the card game. Players place down creature cards on their side both to attack the enemy and defend against incoming attacks, with the opposing player doing much the same. Though in the tradition of multiple roguelikes, including Slay the Spire, your opponent's upcoming moves are forecasted to give you an opportunity to prepare for them the best that you can. From the start, players have access to two card decks. One deck contains creatures with differing levels of attack power and defense, a summoning cost, and special abilities, while your other deck contains zero-cost squirrels with no attack power and only a single point of defense. Each turn, players may draw a card from one of these decks to add to their hand, and they may play as many cards from their hand as they want, provided they can afford the summoning cost. To summon creatures with a cost, players must pay a price in blood or bone, resources that you gain by sacrificing other creatures that have already been placed on the board. This creative mechanic means that your army of creatures is also simultaneously your resource for bringing out new creatures, and players will often have to decide whether a creature is better off as an attacker to take the enemy forces on, a meat shield to absorb incoming damage, or a blood sacrifice to enable your other forces. This makes for some of the wonderful strategy that makes up the minute-to-minute gameplay in the card game. Another clever mechanic in Inscryption is how this game handles health. Unlike Hearthstone, Slay the Spire, or most other card games like these, your health is not measured in hit points, but in a scale that you share with your opponent. Damage done to either side tips the scale one way or the other. If the scale tips too far in your direction, you lose the current round of combat. Lose twice, or lose once to a boss, and your current run will be over. Tip the scales the other direction and you'll win, with overkill damage giving you resources you can use in the game's roguelike portion of the game. This roguelike element will be very familiar to players of games like Slay the Spire. Players will have a branching path they travel on, with each step in that path offering a different opportunity or danger. Some stops on the path will allow you to add cards to your deck, or empower your cards, or permanently sacrifice a card to gift its ability to another card. Some stops will give you the opportunity to choose a single-use item that you can use at any time in the match. The path you choose to take and the choices you make when using these opportunities to shape your deck will be just as important for your success as your choices in the middle of a match. Now, thus far, I've been talking about Inscryption as a card game with roguelike elements, but this is really only painting a part of the picture. Right from the moment you start the game, you're presented with some delightful post-modernist elements, as well as some incredible atmosphere bordering on horror elements that has the game absolutely dripping with dread. When you first play the game, you'll find that you can't start a new game, but must continue a game already in progress by some other unknown player. As you continue to play the game, there's this strong sense that this game is somehow cursed, with a looming threat hanging over you, akin to the feeling like you've just foolishly watched Samara's videotape in the ring. Your cards will take on a life of their own, giving you advice or bossing you around as you progress through the game, and you'll see the game glitch on occasion at odd times. You'll even start to see the echoes of previous unfortunate souls who have played the game. The danger isn't all vague subtext either. Right from the start, you'll sit opposite the shadowy dealer, who is polite but strongly implies that the game you're playing has your own life at stake. He remains a constant looming presence, alternately making veiled threats and then putting on various masks to act out the part of characters within the game, giving off the impression that you're trapped in a dark, candlelit room with a violent madman. And to further highlight this feeling of being trapped, shortly into the game, you'll find that you can get up from the table in between matches in the game to explore the interior of the cabin you find yourself in, which has an array of strange contraptions and arcane devices. Your progress through the game will depend not only on your card playing, but also through your ability to decipher what these objects are and how to use them. One of the best ways that this game conveys its mood and atmosphere is through its incredible atmospheric music and sound design. The soundtrack in this game uses a few different subdued instrumental themes that highlight the feeling of isolation. Meanwhile, the dealer's voice is represented by an angry blaring noise, while your cards speak with a meek and silly sound reminiscent of the Undertale character Sans. Without even needing to know the words spoken, this sound design conveys not only the threat you're facing, but where that threat is coming from. When it comes to the visuals, this is where I have one of my first major issues with the game. Inscryption is dark, and I don't just mean that in terms of the tone or the content, but the actual visibility of the game, with the room you're playing in so weakly lit that sometimes it's difficult to make out some of the cards on the table, particularly cards that are closer to the dealer. This issue isn't resolved by the game's brightness settings, which don't reduce the darkness, they just make the darkness lighter in color. And this issue is especially pronounced when playing the game in handheld mode. Oh, on the note of handheld mode, the Nintendo Switch version of the game doesn't make use of the touchscreen or any other unique features of the Nintendo Switch. Also, before I get too far away from talking about the visuals, I also found that some of the textures in the game were a bit low resolution, including the cards themselves, which have a look that seems somewhat pixelated, although this latter issue may just be a stylistic choice. I'm also frustrated that this game often refuses to let you look at everything you might want to check when making a decision, such as when you need to draw a card and cannot look at your single-use items before deciding which deck to draw from. Finally, I should take a moment to talk about the game's second and third acts, and without spoiling anything, I will say that I do agree with the general consensus that these parts of the game are nowhere near as good as the game's first act, largely because they just don't have the same wonderfully dark atmosphere. However, I still find them enjoyable in their own right. Having said that, even if Inscryption consisted only of its first act and just ended there, this would be an absolute winner in my book. Yes, there are some areas of the game that I felt could have been done better, but overall I was absolutely thrilled by this game's great mix of excellent gameplay and wonderfully sinister atmosphere. On balance, I think I enjoyed the card game at the heart of Slay the Spire more than Inscryption's card game. But I really like the card game here too, and Inscryption also has more to offer with its graphic adventure gameplay elements and its postmodernist story and atmosphere. With all of these elements combined, I strongly recommend Inscryption, although I warn you that it's not for the squeamish, and it's a game that will require a fair amount of both strategic thought and puzzle solving, so it may not be for everyone. However, if you enjoy games like Slay the Spire, and you think you might enjoy something like that but with a stronger focus on story and atmosphere, this game should be a no-brainer for you. Well, that's all I have for this review. Please feel free to comment and let me know what you have to think. If you agree with what I have to say or disagree, please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it or a thumbs down if you don't. And if you want to see more reviews, please head over to the eShopper Reviews subreddit on reddit.com, where I currently have over 2,000 Nintendo Switch game reviews. And if you want to support the subreddit, you can make a donation at our Patreon, which I'll link down below. That's all for this time. Happy playing, eShoppers.